Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, a young couple met at a grocery store after high school, began dating, and maintained a long-distance relationship during college. When the girlfriend went to London for a program, the boyfriend visited her but grew suspicious of her relationship with another man. After discovering her infidelity through phone messages, he confronted her friends, ultimately leading to the end of their relationship. Now let's get into the story. My girlfriend and I met when we were both fresh out of high school and working in the same grocery store over the summer. We were both going to college out of state, but we lived just one town over from each other. We got to talking while we worked there, and we hit it off. I was a bit of a late bloomer when it came to dating, so I didn't realize that she had feelings for me when she did. She ended up asking me out because I was clueless about her feelings toward me. Of course, I said yes. I thought she was amazing and I jumped at the first opportunity one had to go out with her. We continued dating through the rest of our college years, occasionally going to visit the other person on weekends or breaks when we had the chance. But we looked forward to those summer breaks when we could spend 3 months with each other virtually uninterrupted. She was my first love, and I was completely convinced at the time that she and I were going to be together forever. I know now that was just childish naivety, but I was hopeful. The main reason she went to the university that she did was because they had an incredible study program. I knew that in the summer between her junior year and senior year, she was planning on going to London. I knew that from the moment I met her because she was very excited about it. That summer I got to see her for about a week before she flew out to attend her summer program. We still talked often because I wanted to hear all about her travels, so we FaceTimed and texted each other whenever we had the chance. I was happy for her, but I missed her like crazy. I was complaining about it to my parents, and they could see how upsetting it was for me. So they offered to pay for a plane ticket to go see her. My girlfriend was excited about it when I told her, and we planned the perfect time to get together, so she could show me some of her favorite spots in the city and we could spend time together. She told me about a lot of the friends that she made while she was in her program. Of course, I didn't know every single one of her friends, but from what I gathered, it didn't seem like anything was going on. A couple of weeks before I was set to take my trip, she was pretty much MIA in terms of phone calls or responding to my messages. She would check in now and then just to tell me that she was fine, but she wasn't giving me anything else. I had a bad feeling about it initially, thinking that maybe something was going on and she was trying to ghost me, but that didn't seem like something she would do, so I wasn't sure. When it got closer to my date of departure, she was communicating with me a lot more. She told me that she had been stressed out with class stuff and was sort of in a bad place because of it. I felt bad for assuming anything else was going on. I flew to London, and she met me at the airport to take me back to the flat she was staying in. She introduced me to a lot of her friends. The only person that she introduced me to that I didn't know about beforehand was a guy that we'll call Dan. I hated being this way, but seeing the guy that I knew was probably hanging out with my girlfriend without me automatically raised some red flags. My girlfriend was beautiful, and in my eyes, anybody would have been foolish not to want to be with her. However, I quickly picked up on the fact that he was dating another one of my girlfriend's friends, who we will call Katie. The two of us went sightseeing the first day that I was there. She showed me some incredible places, and we went to some lovely cafes and bookstores. The second day that I was there, we went on a double date with Dan and Katie. There was this fun arcade that we went to, and afterward, we went for a walk in a park. Katie and I actually had a lot in common when it came to the video games at the arcade. It was a place that she suggested we all go to because she loved it, and my girlfriend and Dan weren't really into things like that. So it might have been a little bit of my fault in this, but I spent the majority of that time talking to her about the games. Dan and my girlfriend were sitting at the table together, and I happened to look over at them at one point to see them smiling and laughing at each other, with Dan reaching for her hand. It immediately brought back all the suspicions that I had. When everything was over, I asked my girlfriend about it. She told me that it was nothing and he was just making a joke, and he was a touchy person. That didn't make me feel any better. We ended up getting into an argument about it because I felt like she was lying to me. It was difficult because we only had a couple more days together in London before I had to go back to the States and get ready for my senior year. After that, we wouldn't see each other until the winter break. I could tell that she was still upset with me in the morning, but we apologized and decided that we wanted to make the best of the time we would have together. I didn't see Dan or Katie again for the rest of the time I was in London. I got back home, and I was bummed with how everything went while I was with her. I went back to school for the first semester of my senior year, and things seemed to be normal between us. We were communicating over the phone like we always did during the semester. I saw her again over the winter break, and things were different between us. She was cold and less open to me than she normally was. By that time, I wasn't thinking about the argument we had, and I genuinely didn't understand why she was acting the way that she was. Whenever we would talk, it would always be about things not related to us. Specifically, she would always tell me about things that were going on in the group chat she had with the people she met in London. I know she adored all of them, and she considered them to be very close friends. She was contemplating moving to London after graduation and getting an apartment with them. I spent New Year's Eve with her, and I noticed that she didn't want to be around me much. We were at a party at a bar in her hometown, and around midnight, I went to find her to kiss her when the ball dropped. Just as I was about to kiss her, she turned her face away from me, so I kissed her cheek. I was surprised, but I didn't make a big deal out of it. When we got back to her house after everything, I asked her about it. My gut was telling me that she did it because she didn't want to commit to me for a year, and it was some superstition that she had. She made it seem like I was looking into it too much. I slept over at her house that night, but I couldn't get the idea of it out of my mind. We had been drifting apart for some time, and I didn't want to lose her, but it felt like I was. It was about 3 a.m. and I couldn't sleep. I was just lying in bed next to her, and I saw her phone buzz on the nightstand showing Dan's name. From my understanding, they didn't talk to each other much aside from group settings. Seeing him reach out to her was confusing. I quietly grabbed her phone and read the message. He wished her a happy New Year's and said that he was sorry for not being her midnight kiss. That prompted me to look through their other messages, where I saw that they had been exchanging pictures and videos of each other for months. From some of the context, I clearly understood that they had been sleeping together while she was in London. I knew that I was right to be suspicious about what was happening with Dan. My gut told me something was going on with them, and my girlfriend lied to me when I asked her about it. I didn't see any way that I could continue being with her after what happened, and it didn't seem like she wanted to make it work either. I sent myself screenshots of their messages so I would have them, and I left. I didn't tell her about what I was doing, and I didn't give her any heads up that I knew about her and Dan. I just left and didn't tell her anything. She was going to be wondering what happened for a little while. I didn't talk to her for the rest of the break, even though she messaged me a few times wanting to get together before we left for our final semesters. I went back to school and continued ignoring her. I could tell from her messages that she was hurt by my completely ghosting her, which I was thankful for. She hurt me, and I wanted her to be hurt back, but I also wanted to do something else. I didn't feel like it was enough to get back at her for how she hurt me. I stood on it for a while and eventually decided to reach out to her friends from London and let them know what my girlfriend had been doing with Dan. I threw all of them in a group chat, and I explained everything, sending screenshots of the evidence to them. I didn't respond much in the chat, but it blew up with all of them expressing how shocked they were and telling me how sorry they were for me. On top of that, they kept mentioning how there were signs all along, but they didn't want to believe it. Dan's girlfriend, Katie, was in that chat, and she was talking about how she was going to make him regret what he did. Surprisingly, they didn't kick me out of the group chat. I was in it, and they kept checking in with me to see how I was doing. They seemed like a solid group of people. From what they told me, they all stopped talking to my girlfriend because they couldn't stand her for what she did. My girlfriend reached out to me after she found out what happened and told me that I had no business going through her phone. Her main point was that I invaded her privacy and ruined her plans for after graduation. She couldn't afford to live in London on her own, so she had no way of making that dream come true. Katie got her revenge on Dan by sleeping with his brother. Normally, I wouldn't condone behavior like that, but it was pretty funny. Not only did she break up with Dan, but she potentially ruined his relationship with his sibling. I guess that was one way to get revenge. Now I have graduated, and that was a couple of years in the past. I'm not close friends with any of those girls from that group chat, but we're still friendly. I do know that if I ever end up in London again, I can hang out with a couple of them, and we can have a nice little reunion. Today's second story. In this story, after 11 years of marriage, OP discovers his wife's affair with her gynecologist, who faked a cancer diagnosis to manipulate her. Despite his love and efforts to support her through health issues, he finds texts revealing the betrayal. Confronting them, he gathers evidence, sues the doctor for malpractice, and divorces his wife, leaving him devastated. Now let's get into the story. My wife and I have been together for about 11 years. While we did have a bit of a gap, we hit it off well. She was in college, and I was interning. We met up, working together. After she graduated, I asked her to marry me, and then of course, even though it had been about 3 years, she said yes. To say it was the best night of my life is an understatement. It truly was. When we married 8 years ago, I thought it would be perfect. We danced, sang, and were married. She smiled from ear to ear, and that night, it felt like the start of our lives. And of course, the start of the hell I was put through. My wife's always had health issues, especially when it comes to reproductive health. At first, it started with some aches and pains, and eventually, it turned into major issues with her uterus. Doctors told us that having a kid was out of the question, which was a little disappointing, but I accepted it because I loved her so much. We moved into a new house, a huge, stately place with more than enough for us. She got mad at me because she thought I was trying to push the kid thing again, but I insisted that was definitely not the case. I just wanted a life together that we could share and be happy with. My wife and I worked well together, and I was happy to have her. However, this also led to other strange goings-on. The first was that she started spending less time around me. She was out a lot, and I always wondered where she was going. She would come home late, and sometimes when we talked, it felt like there were walls. She insisted that she loved me. I wanted to believe her. She means the world to me, and I want that for both of us. Then came another bomb that was dropped. The cancer scare. My wife started having pains once again. We even got her surgery to help with this, removing part of her reproductive system. However, cysts were found, and she was referred to a specialist to help with these problems. I figured it would be nothing. Maybe she's just having a problem. Some issues. She started seeing another person, and they claimed it was a possible tumor. Now I'm worried as hell. My wife might have cancer. We've dealt with a couple of serious situations involving her reproductive health, but I never thought it would be cancer. My wife encouraged me to see the specialist. I thought, fine, maybe I should. We get in, and my wife starts acting overly friendly and very sweet with him. A complete 180 from the distant woman I've dealt with up to this point. Something seems up, and I can't put my finger on it, but I dismiss those thoughts. Maybe my wife is just being nice to him, but she told me afterward that she have a few appointments to treat this and that she go alone. At the time I was working long hours at a desk job. I didn't want to do this, but I said sure. Maybe my wife's treatment will go faster. So she started the treatment. However, I always thought that the hours were strange. She would go in the afternoon and would stay till well after most businesses closed. I asked her about this, and my wife said that he preferred to see her after their patients since the treatment involved medicine and chemotherapy to help with the possible tumor. I thought, sure, maybe that's it. She got the treatment, and for 2 months, I did everything I could to help my wife, even with my desk job. I prepared dinner and cleaned up the whole 9 yards. But my wife still stayed aloof and didn't seem as open towards me as before. This was beginning to get ridiculous. I wasn't exactly sure what was happening, but she shied away from my touches and didn't want anything to do with me at times. 2 months passed. I thought my wife would be all cleared by now, but the doctor insisted that she come in. The treatments continued. Something was up, however. He was seeing my wife during this time, and my wife never had any of the symptoms of chemotherapy. It got weird when I noticed she still had all of her hair. I asked about it, to which she responded that it was a new type of treatment and that she was fortunate to try it. I dismissed this once more. Clearly, my wife didn't want to get into it. I of course wished I could shake these thoughts, however. They continued bothering me, eating away like a festering wound. I wanted to believe that it was nothing but just my imagination. That was until I saw the texts. My wife asked me to grab something in the bedroom for her. I walked in and her phone buzzed. Curiosity got the better of me, much to my dismay, and I looked down at it. It was the gynecologist, Dr. Roth. However, the messages were not appropriate for the business he was in, especially with my wife. The flirty text sat there, mocking me. She told me how he would keep this up to keep seeing her. She mentioned that I was a fool and that I didn't catch on to their affair. Anger boiled within. I didn't want to bring it up just yet. I loved my wife, and if I asked her now, she might try to refute it. I knew the best way to fix this cheating mess would be to catch them in the act, which is exactly what I did. I set it up so that I would be home late the next time she had an appointment. I told my wife this, and her eyes lit up, which disgusted me. She wasn't even trying to hide it. She wanted me to catch them in the act. It made the pain of this even harder. On the day of, I drove over to the gynecologist's office. There was but one light on, and I knew it was them. I stepped inside. The door was open. I heard sounds. I walked closer, and that's when I heard it. Your husband fell for the cancer scare. My wife gloated, saying that he did. She mentioned he was gullible and so easy to use for whatever perverse reason she could. I wanted to throw up. I held onto the doorknob, listening to their conversation. I waited until I heard sounds, and that's when I made my move. I opened the door, catching her gynecologist between her legs, and my wife looked so happy. Anger boiled within me as I called them out. My wife stared in shock, but she never denied it. In fact, she seemed to think she did nothing wrong. I loved you. I thought you felt the same way. That's when my wife dropped the ball. She's hated me for a long time. Dr. Roth treated her like the woman she wanted to be, and since then, they've been planning a future together. I saw red. In fact, I don't think red is the only color I saw. I wanted to lash out, to punch him, but I didn't. Instead, I asked him why he did this. He said it wouldn't affect his practice, and that what people don't know won't hurt them. That's when I pulled it out, the recorder I had. I set it up initially to catch anything, especially if my wife denied it. I told him that he would pay, and he'd regret what he'd done. I kicked my wife out. She begged me to at least have a little bit of empathy, but I told her that maybe this wouldn't have happened if she just told me there was a problem in our marriage. She bottled it up. I learned she hated my guts for at least the last year, and that Dr. Roth diagnosed her with a tumor that didn't even exist just to have intimate with her. The words disgust me. Even just mentioning this disgusts me. Well, on a more positive note, I managed to get Dr. Roth permanently fired. I also took a lawsuit against him for malpractice, and he was immediately sentenced to jail. How long I'm not sure, but when I heard the news, I was thrilled. As for my wife, we got a divorce, and she disappeared. Apparently, she didn't stay with Dr. Roth. Surprising, I know, but that cheating harlot seemed to only care about one thing, and one thing only: herself. It still stings to think I was hurt by her like this, and to think that she doesn't care about me. My self-esteem is ruined, and I don't think I'll ever recover.